Hello and welcome to the Geek Battle Gaming YouTube channel. Today we are going to be looking at the Playdate from Panic. And here we see this little square device which is very thin, very compact, and has this amazingly cute little crank. I didn't even know that cranks could be cute, but look at it. How cute is that? And we're going to be taking it through its 1-bit screen through the paces because it has been out for a couple of years now, but I've only had mine for about 6 months because it's been super difficult to get your hands on. Waiting lists and queues and high demand and all that stuff, but I'm going to be finding out if this is still awesome in 2024 and beyond. So without further ado, let's check out the Playdate. Bosh! Are you feeling cranky? I know I am. Well, it's no need to panic, because a Playdate is bound to lift your spirits. Now, enough of that shtick, which I'm sure only about half of the people in the room get anyway. The Playdate is here, and it's been here for a while, and now it is time to check it out after a couple of years on the market. The Playdate, though, has to win the prize for quirkiest console currently on the market. And I'd say the Playdate is probably the most quirky console that has maybe ever come out. Certainly since maybe the Tiger R-Zone in the 1990s. It's a handheld console which is much smaller than even the Game Boy Pocket and would even make the Game Boy Micro feel a bit fat today. The first thing you'll notice about this is that it has a crank on its right hand side. The Playdate has been made with being fun and quirky in mind, and most of the games made for it are ones that are designed around its unique presentation and controls. It first launched in April 2022, having been developed by Panic, who I'd only really heard of ever because of the quirky release of the Untitled Goose Game which they published. Now, having been announced in 2019 and released in 2022, it's something that's been in players' mind space for some time now, but truthfully, I only got mine a few months ago. But so did an awful lot of Playdate owners. That is because the Playdate isn't a console you can just order off of Amazon and it arrive tomorrow, nor is it a console that you can pick up in store as an impulse buy. Panic is a small company compared to the likes of Nintendo, Sony and Microsoft, and as such, if you want a Playdate, you had to order it from them, and would get it sent to you once they had enough produced. I mean, some people went the route of buying it off of eBay, and there was plenty for sale there, but there'd always be a markup on the price. So I decided to actually wait my turn, and it meant that I didn't get it for quite some time. Now, their release method was smart of them to only make as many of the consoles as people actually wanted, but the downside is it did mean there was a waiting list and everyone had to get in queue. This also meant that there is a sense of mystique around the console. And even now, with Panic having recently announced that you could now go on their website and order one and get one quite quickly without a big waiting queue, it still feels like a new console. But this is a sign of how times have changed. There are now more than just the big three of Nintendo, PlayStation and Xbox, and the likes of the Playdate, Steam Deck, Atari VCS, and Analog Pocket and Analog Duo, etc. are all consoles you pretty much have to get from the source. The Playdate is not like any of those though. Although it may look like a mini Game Boy, the Playdate shouldn't be compared to the Analog Pocket, nor the retro-themed Evercade line of consoles. It's not an emulation device, and pretty much all of the games for the Playdate are exclusive to the console. The tiny console comes packed with a staggering 4GB of storage, but before you start getting your solid state and NVMe drives out, it really doesn't need any more than that. But also, it has a whopping 16 megabytes of RAM. Yup, and that is megabyte, not gigabyte. You see, as impressive as the console is, and in so many ways it is very impressive, it's also designed to be very retro. It has a staggering 1-bit screen that displays everything basically in black and white, 2 tones, light and dark, and that's it. The screen is only 2.7 inches with a resolution of 400 by 240, and it does have a super high resolution display, which is one of the key features about it, which means that it isn't just really incredibly retro, even though in so many ways it is really incredibly retro. Now, whilst all of these specs may sound limiting, the console is designed around the ethos that with restrictions comes creativity. I've had my Playdate for several months, and as any owner of the Playdate will tell you, you need to wait weeks to see everything you purchased on day one. I think 12 weeks in fact. You see, the system comes with a season of games as part of the package. Doesn't matter when you get it compared to anyone else, your season starts from the day you switch it on. There were 24 odd games in the first season, and as things are, it doesn't appear there will be a season 2. Now, I may be completely wrong on that front, so don't all hammer away at me in the comments if later a season 2 does emerge. Will probably get announced the moment I put this video out, just because, as I said, for many people this is still a new console. I mean, what would be the point in putting out season 2 when most players still are waiting to get caught up on season 1? I mean, it could be that we'll get a season 2 once they get the sense that the initial backlog of orders is done and dusted, and then people will get season 1, and once everyone's caught up, maybe sometime in this year or maybe next, they'll announce season 2. Certainly for the price of the console, which was $179 US, and yes, I had to order this from America in dollars. You may notice from my accent that I'm English. Having all of these games included is a good thing. I'm not sure how the price would have been changed if they were to have sold it without the season of games, but my suspicion is the price you pay is mostly for the console, and the games, which range in their size and play length and scope, are more of a bonus rather than it be like Nintendo giving away Mario Kart on a Switch, or like Xbox getting a copy of Gears of War or Halo in the box with it. They're not giving you a AAA full price game. But the 24 games that you do get, you know, obviously they'd have had to have done deals with the people that made them and like licensed, and they'd have needed a cut, so you probably do get a reasonable value. The price has actually recently gone up on the console to $199, which is a shame for anyone who didn't jump in early, but costs go up to produce the console, and so this apparently was a needed step, and it is what it is. Still, for the extra $20, as long as the console can keep going, then fair enough. Now, the console doesn't take any physical media, and so this sits next to my Steam Deck in my all-digital handheld collection, along with my PSP Go. The games on the console come in one of three ways. You can either just get the games that come as part of the season, where you get a couple of new games a week until the season ends. These will be automatically downloaded once you've set up the system and connected it to the internet. The second way to get games is, well, back in the day, for the first owners of the console, you'd have to sideload extra games. Now, there are tons of Playdate games currently available from itch.io and probably some other places, and you can get the games from there easily and put it onto your system. Apparently a newer feature, but one that was already implemented into the system from when I got it, is the catalog. Now, this is their eShop, their online store, where you can purchase games directly on the system, and that is an awesome feature which, to be honest, I can't imagine getting it initially and having to sideload everything, even if it's meant to be easy. Truthfully, I prefer getting stuff from a download store on the console rather than having to fiddle around with sideloading. And look, I'm not against sideloading, but anything that takes away any of the extra faff gets my seal of approval. Now, one thing I'm not so keen on with the system is the loading time in the shop. I've got pretty good Wi-Fi, pretty good internet. It's not like you can plug this in via being wired. And yet the download speed when you get a new game seems to take a while. And look, this is a little bit nitpicky because I know it's not got tons of RAM and its specs are low but probably high for what it's trying to achieve, but the download times and install times take a lot longer than I expected considering the relatively small size. Also, when you're on the eShop, just whilst I'm being nitpicky, the eShop called Catalog, I should clarify, the games sometimes don't have the graphics or logos load as quickly as you're going through the shop, and then it feels a little bit tedious to go through everything. And also, and panic, this is my big note for you, put the names of the games underneath the logos, because sometimes the logo has the name and sometimes it's just a picture. So if I give the example of Choo Choo Mimic, just showing like a treasure chest with a tongue sticking out doesn't tell me that the game is called Choo Choo Mimic. And it's a little bit frustrating just to have to click on so many of the games just to see the title and then go back a screen and load and blah blah blah. I know this is really nitpicky and someone in the comments is going to be like, get a life, man, but you know, hell, I'm trying to review it and I'm trying to point out all the good, but also anything that needs improving upon. Also, there isn't any background download system in place, which is a shame. At least not that I found to switch on. Once again, in the comments, tell me if I'm wrong about this. Look, these are all things I'm used to on other platforms in this day and age, and although this is somewhat presented as a retro experience, it's kind of not. There wasn't anything back in the day that could produce what the Playdate can put out. The ability to have 3D style games, as you'd see in P Racing, even if it's perhaps done with some trickery that I don't understand, and the smooth animation on lots of the titles and resolution are all something the Game Boy could never achieve. So if it's modern in all these ways, the fact that loading and download times is slow is a real shame, but not the end of the world. But heck, enough about the ins and outs of eShops and loading times and such like. Let's talk about what it's actually like to play games on the Playdate. In my experience with it over the last few months, it's been really fun. I'll admit that as I waited for the season of games to unfold, I sometimes had weeks where I put it down, forgot about it for a week, and so when I returned to it, there'd sometimes be 4 or 6 games waiting for me. This was cool, but also a little overwhelming in a sense. It's partly why it's taken me a few months to do my review on the channel. When I first got it, I was super keen to chart my experience and review the console and the game straight away, but that would have almost been unfair to be able to give my in-depth thoughts on the console. I've now had enough time to go through plenty of the season of games and also a bunch of eShop games which I've got in addition to the season, and see what the Playdate experience is like. Now, in terms of the games available, I'm very impressed with the creativity of ways that indie developers have found to use the crank. Not every time is it a hit, and often you'll have various options of control methods, so you can still play with the D-pad if you prefer in many instances. The game that drew me most to the console was Time Travel Adventure, because heck, this channel is called Geek Battle, and I'm a big old time travel and science fiction nerd. And with Time Travel Adventure, you play as an almost stick-like figure character who has to rush to meet his girlfriend after having woken up late for the date. So it's funny that this game is almost about a play date. You're playing a date. Well, you're playing getting to the date, but anyway, you see what I'm going for there. You use the crank to fast forward time, but you have to be increasingly precise in how fast or slow you crank to dodge obstacles. Sometimes you even need to reverse time by taking the crank backwards. It's super impressive and a really good example of what can be done with the crank. The animation in the game shows where the console is super capable of smooth experience and fast screen refresh rate and all of that good stuff. It's very impressive. Now, the screen is super reflective, having just mentioned about it, and whilst it isn't backlit, it does look really good. There's no sense of ghosting that you'd get on the original Game Boy, or probably the handheld with the worst case of ghosting, the Tiger Gamecom. Nothing like that. It's absolutely smooth animation and very clean and clear graphics. But you do need to make sure you have reasonable lighting, and that is perhaps one of the only flaws with it. Whitewater Wipeout is a surfing game which takes some time to get used to, but again, the graphics are great and everything looks like the Aha music video Take On Me. I'm not going to sing it. The game is also a great showcase of how the crank can be used for precise movement when surfing. Forrest Byrnes is a 2D platformer that plays really well, and other than when you're rescuing a kid from down the well where you have to use the crank, and perhaps when you're moving through a menu, you don't need to use the crank to play most of the game at all. Forrest Byrnes is up there as one of my favourite games on the system, and one I find easy to jump back into and play lots and lots when using the Playdate. Like a lot of games here, the game is short and sweet. Many of the games are just ones where you do like 1 or 2 simple tasks over and over again just to try to get a high score, like you would back in the day with arcade games like Space Invaders or Pac-Man or Donkey Kong. It may not be brimming with tons of different content, but you try to get really good at it to get the highest score possible. Now look, I won't go through each of the games in the season as part of this review, as I can go into greater depth for all of my favourites of them in later videos, but there are loads that are worth putting some real time into. And look, whether you care for the games from this season or not, if you get a Playdate, you get them. So they're going to be there for you to check out if you want the system, no matter what. And either way, I will note that as almost all of the games are original to the console, and when I say that, what I mean is that I believe that to be the case, but I don't actually know. Some of these indie games may have versions elsewhere. I do know that Tapeworm, Disco Puzzle and Choo Choo Mimic have full colour versions of those games available elsewhere, as I'd played them first on Evercade. And because of that, I know that those games are perhaps also available on NES and Dreamcast, and that might be the case with a bunch of these games, but I suspect that an awful lot of the Playdate games are exclusive to the console. There is a Facebook group for the Playdate, which has a good community of users who can point you in the direction of which games you should play or download next. And of course, whilst I'm here, I'll mention, do subscribe to this channel, because I'm going to start covering all of my favourite Playdate games, so you'll get a sense of which ones to check out or not. Now, I do feel that there needs to be a greater effort or way for players to know which games are the best to get and what to expect from the games. On the download store on the Playdate, the catalogue, there is the staff pick section of the eShop, and this is useful, but then you're just reading the blurb, which will always shine a game in the best possible light. So you don't get enough that will tell you this game is like this game has this length to play. I think they need to do a little bit more, just because it's not like loads of big gaming websites are covering all of these indie titles. So I think they should give more informational stuff on the Playdate website. I don't know, maybe I'm nitpicking. The console is quite small, so you may start to notice it be less comfortable to hold after an extended gameplay session. I like that it is flat and that it has a small form factor, but the logistics of holding the unit one-handed to use the crank with the other hand means that you'll end up feeling the sharp edge of the device pressed into your hand the more you're holding it. And you'll feel that more than when you hold it two-handed, because you'll end up having it rest against your hand with the corner edge as you're cranking. But anyway, the D-pad is nice, but not the greatest D-pad ever. It more than does the job though for the games that I've played on the system. There is a home button, which is useful, although as a Game Boy-like device, it does feel like it is missing the start and select buttons. Sometimes in games, you'd use those buttons in ways that home just doesn't quite achieve. One example would be to bring up like an inventory, or that on some games you'd press select just to change weapons or something. Pressing the home button where it could have like an option to go back to like the main menu or something in the game, it doesn't quite work when it kind of needs to fulfill the purpose of being that you return to the actual Playdate home menu and stuff like this. So an extra menu button would have been nice, but again, it is what it is at this stage. Now, having been in the hands of the public for 2 years, I feel the console is still getting going. The more people that have it and discover it, the brighter the future for the system will be. The biggest strength of the platform is that they opened it up for users to be able to make their own games for the console. I love the mirror app that you can use to stream and capture footage from the system. And as you'll have seen on this video, a lot of the gameplay footage is footage that I've captured via the mirror app. This is a super easy to use app, and you just connect your Playdate to your PC with a USB cable, and then it will pop up on screen as soon as you've got the app open. You don't even need a capture card to be able to mirror the screen. Then you can either use a software development kit available via download, or use online tools to be able to actually create and design your own games for the Playdate. Personally, I'm very interested into looking into this more in the future, but truthfully, with other projects, including this YouTube channel, I'm not sure how much time I'll really get to put into it. But still, some of the scope of Playdate games is quite small, so maybe I can tinker just to get a little Geek Battle Gaming game out there. That would be cool. Time will tell though. In terms of the future of the platform, I'd love to see some more well-known games get a 1-bit version developed on the system. Now, I don't know how likely that is, but whilst I'm happy with the quirky indie games that populate the system as it is, I'd love to see how some big name franchises could translate to the strengths and limitations of the Playdate. P-Racing has shown that something like Sega Rally or Forza wouldn't be an absolute impossibility on the system. The first-person dungeon crawler Legend of Etad also gives you a view of what a first-person shooter on the Playdate would be like. And yeah, I get that's a dungeon crawler, not a first-person shooter. Don't worry, I'm going to do a separate video all about that one, because it truly is one of the most visually impressive games on the console. Now, I'm not sure if they'd ever do a second Playdate system, like a Playdate 2 or a Super Playdate, because if they did, wouldn't that just be the original Game Boy? But anyway, I can imagine that one day there may be a Playdate Pro, something with a backlit screen, more RAM, and potentially an analog stick, and that start and select button. Imagine if one day there was a system with dual cranks. I mean, I think it would actually be impossible to use, but it would look cool. It'd be like this system has arms on either sides of it. So the big question is, after all this, is should you get the Playdate console if you've yet to jump on board? And if you do have it, do you agree, is it still awesome? Or is it not quite what you were expecting? Now, in terms of if you should get it, from me, the answer is an absolute yes. I mean, if you like indie games and are impressed with creativity over absolute graphical spectacle. There are some real gems of games that you can't get anywhere else. No other platform is capable of replicating the crank exactly as it is. Using an analog stick just wouldn't quite be the same. And whilst they may not all be AAA games that you get on the console, many of the games are perfect if you just want a little console to slip into your pocket or bag and have a quirky little game to play for a few minutes as an alternative to using your mobile phone. So that's just about all of my thoughts here on the Playdate, but do make sure you check out the channel because there are going to be tons more of the individual reviews of all of the games that you've seen me show footage of during this review, plus so many more. I've got about 40 or 50 games on my Playdate now, and there's an eShop sale on at the moment, so I'm probably going to panic and, haha, pun intended, not intended in fact, I'm probably going to panic and buy a bunch more in the next couple of days. So we'll see. So that is going to wrap things up for the Playdate. Now, I think it's a really cool and little quirky device. It's kind of a niche product, but there are so many games for it now. I think there is literally something on there that anyone could have fun with. And I think it's just going to go from strength to strength, the more people that get it and the more people that make games for it. So that is going to wrap things up now. I'm going to get on and play with my Playdate, but I would really appreciate if you would smash that subscribe button here on the Geek Battle Gaming YouTube channels. I've got more and more videos coming out, and I said channels instead of channel, but I'm already deep into this take, so I'm not going to go again. But I've got loads of videos, hardware reviews, documentaries, lots of gaming reviews on here, so I would appreciate if you could support the channel just by clicking that subscribe button, like and comment on the videos. I try to respond to absolutely everything. And if you want to read the written article version of this discussion, head over to www.xstreamed.tv/gaming. And with that, until next time, stay safe, always stay extremed, keep cranking, and ciao for now. Boom! And I'm off the air.